It wasn't my imagination I could snap out of, nor was it a dream I could wake up from. I couldn't pretend that he wasn't here either, because he was here with me. This was real. Aaron Hart stood closer to me than ever. I could feel his heated gaze watching my every move, wanting to see my next reaction. I turned from the elevator to face him and found a look on his face I couldn't figure out. Zera Adams. His deep, hoarse voice called out like we had cost to settle, and shivers ran down my spine. His voice had been my downfall in the past, and even now it still was. "You look amazing," he said, and his eyes dragged over my body like it was on full display for him. "Indeed, the years have been kind." I swallowed. I left him in the past 5 years ago, and ever since then, I had avoided any and everything that would bring him back into my life. Now here he was, standing before me and staring me dead in the face like he could see my very soul. I needed to gather my courage and face the reality before me. There was no other choice. I've hidden away for too long. Mr. Aaron Hart. "It's nice to know that after 5 long years you still remember my name," he said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. I screamed the name all day during that faithful weekend, so it would be hard to forget. My cheeks heat, not at what he just said, but at the profane thought in my head, "What do you want?" I asked, not loving the idea of him calling the shots and messing with my mind. "You should be back in the hall with the others." He ignored my words and instead asked, "Is he your boyfriend?" I knew who the he was. I had stepped out of the hall with Daniel. He probably had his eyes on me the whole time, while wondering who the man that led me out was. I scoffed at his audacity because I didn't see how that concerned him. "I don't see how that's any of your business. What do you want?" I asked again, my patience growing thin. I needed to know his business. I needed to know what he knows so I can choose my battle wisely. "You're already on the attack," he pointed out, taking a step forward and bringing himself closer to me, "but I have done nothing to trigger that." My eyes widened. "You have done nothing? How about stalking me? I saw you last week, watching me. I thought I had hallucinated then, but now I know I didn't. Yet you can't seem to understand why I am on the attack." "It's not stalking. It was a harmless attempt to rekindle with an old friend." I didn't let him finish. "I am not your friend. We were 2 people who had heated moments over the weekend. That's it, nothing more, nothing less." "It was more, and you know that," he argued, taking another step forward, and my heart skipped a beat. "I saw it in your eyes, Zera. I have moved past the event of that week long ago," but his words just forced the memory back into my head. I remembered it like it was yesterday. I remembered how he had him on my back, on my hands and knees, moaning, crying, and reaping excess and writhing from too much pleasure. I pulled myself back to reality and cleared my throat, not failing to notice the smirk lingering on his face. My body seemed to be on fire, and singular reactions surged through me. "That's in the past, and I've moved on from it. It doesn't seem like you have. Your nipples are rock hard, pressing against the fabric of your clothes, and your heart is skipping at an alarming rate. Your blood is rushing through your veins at a pace you never expected, and shivers are surging down south, just at the very thought of the weekend we had. So no, I don't think it's the past." I bite down on my lips. He shouldn't know what he knows, and somehow he did. And it terrified me. The only good news in all of this was that he didn't know about Zion. At least if he did, he would have asked who the child I was holding on to at the restaurant was, but so far he hadn't, which told me he had no clue. "We can leave now," Daniel said, walking toward me, and only slowed down when he took notice of Aaron standing close to me. I turned my attention to Daniel and smiled at him. "Good, then let's go," I said, and turned to the elevator, uttering no other word to Aaron, who stood silently watching me go. I gave the men no time to meet and greet because I couldn't afford that. I was grateful that Daniel had walked in when he did, because Aaron had had me backed up against the wall with his words. I had no response to escape. He had the upper hand, and he knew it too. Daniel's interruption was the saving grace I needed. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked as we entered the car and fastened the seatbelts. I had uttered no words since we left Aaron in the hallway, and I knew it was only a matter of time before that sparked Daniel's curiosity. I shook my head. "I'm fine." His eyes lingered on me, and I knew he didn't buy my answer. Are you sure? I flashed him a small, genuine smile. Yes, I am fine. Forging my way ahead had been the thought that had clouded my mind since I left Aaron over 5 minutes ago, and I still hadn't found a way forward. That was not the last of him. I knew that the very beginning. This man seemed to be on a mission, and I was entwined in it somehow. The organizers held a meeting the week that followed, and headed by the vice-chancellor, Toby Akindele, used it to thank everyone at the university who dedicated their time and effort to see the success of the fundraiser. According to their report, this year's fundraiser was twice the revenue of the last, making it the most successful they have had since they started. It was an excellent step in the right direction for the university. Being part of the movement gave me a sense of pride, and knowing I helped made education easier for someone made me happy. My joy, however, decreased when I learnt the largest donator for the night was Mr. Aaron Hart, with over $200,000 spent in the night. This also differed from his other pledges during the many events that took place. I saw everyone cheer, and though I felt happy because this was something good for the university, it wasn't good for me. I knew who Aaron was, and I knew what his presence meant, so even while others cheered and clapped, I didn't. I noticed Daniel's keen gaze on me from the back where he sat, watching what took place with those seated in the meeting hall. He had walked in on my moment with Aaron and knew my lack of response to the good news must have had something to do with it. He was drawing his conclusion, and it was only a matter of time before he reached it. The meeting was soon adjourned, and I exited the hall to start my day at work. Since we already spent the first 30 minutes of work on this meeting, I now had an hour and 30 minutes left for my first lecture. I had so much to cover, and the end of the semester drew closer with every passing day. It wasn't a surprise that Daniel followed behind me as I made my way through the hallway that led to my office. My colleague was wired with an acute need to check up on me, and it was both a blessing and a curse. "Daniel, good morning," I said with a bright smile as he caught up with me. "Good morning, Zera. How are you doing?" I slowed down. "Very well, thank you. And your health?" "Much better, thank you. And thank you for taking me home that night even when you didn't have to. You are a lifesaver." I smiled at him. "You're welcome." He gave me a noble smile that I found charming. "I'm sorry I couldn't call or visit over the weekend. I had a lot of family meetups." I shook my head. "You don't owe me any explanation, Daniel. You already did a lot by taking me home." I stopped talking when my eyes caught sight of Aaron Hart walking toward us. Everything around me stopped for the moments that passed as though a god was gracing with his presence. With each step he took, he did with grace, and he moved around like he owned the place. He made my heart skip and didn't have to do a thing. I should have expected his presence. Being the highest donor of the night would give him some special privileges. One of those would be his involvement in the affairs of the university towards the spending of the fund. In other words, I had to get used to seeing his face for the next few weeks to come. That's how I was told things would go. Yet, I didn't prepare for it, and that was on me. I told Dia about my encounter at the fundraiser, and though my first plan was to run with my son, she told me that wasn't the best option. I realized she was right. Running would mean starting all over with my son in a new place. Also, I hadn't saved up enough money to help me do that in the last 2 years. His 3-piece navy blue suit did justice to his already perfect features. His hair tied into a ponytail and his beard groomed and neat made him look enduring. Thinking about it now, I should have gone with my first thought, because facing problems hasn't been my strongest point. Not when he affected me in ways I could not control. Not when he knew the effect he had on me. His eyes met mine, and, just like days ago at the fundraiser, my heart skipped a beat. He must have heard, because I could swear I saw a smirk across the corner of his lips. I shouldn't be this affected by him, especially since, unlike the other night, we weren't alone. But Aaron's effect didn't care if I was alone or in the crowd. It hit hard every time. The hallway grew silent as he got to where we were, and we stood like 3 dumb people. Aaron's eyes lingered on me, and though I tried to break it off and speak, I failed the first few tries as if I was under some form of compulsion to remain silent. "Leave us," he commanded like he spoke to his servant. I knew he spoke to Daniel, even though his eyes didn't sway from mine. Daniel didn't move. Instead, he turned to me, and I saw the worried look on his face from the corner of my eyes. Daniel might not be as tall or built as Aaron, but I have seen him fight, and he fights dirty. When I first got my job, he offered to take me out to celebrate at the bar in the heart of the city. There, we ran into some assholes. Long story short, Daniel launched at the men who used profane words on me, and though he took quite a beating, he came out victorious. Still, I didn't want him to have a fallout with Aaron. It wasn't a sight I wanted to see. He was important to the university, and that meant he was important to us, and falling out with him might get us both in trouble. Aaron Hart seemed like one that would easily unleash hell on earth and have no remorse about it. With Aaron's presence, Daniel's suspicion would skyrocket, and he would probably figure there was a history between us. He was smart that way. "It's fine," I said to Daniel, who looked anything but convinced. This made me turn to him, adding, "I promise, Daniel, it's fine." He nodded, yet his reluctance lingered even as he stepped away to give us privacy. As soon as Daniel was far away, my eyes returned to fix on Aaron, blank of any reaction. I tightened my grip around the handbag in my hand. "Mr. Aaron Hart, good morning." I had gotten much control over the stupid reaction of my body, and I felt much better. "You sound so formal," he pointed out. "The last time we spoke, I specifically told him we were not friends because we weren't. The only relationship that should exist between us should be formal, because that's what the university needed. As I should be. Your contributions to the fundraiser would go a long way in aiding the university." I wanted to think he had donated from the goodness of his heart, but I had high doubts about it. This was his way of keeping himself in my life and ruining everything I've worked hard to build. Or this was him just trying to be a nice person and help make education easier for those who need it. Not everything has to be about you, Zera. I did not remember falling out with you in the time we spent together, so I don't understand why you're cold towards me. Of course, he wouldn't. Wrongdoers barely remember those they wrong, but it's not the case for those wronged. I'm not cold, Mr. Hart, just being formal as I should be. His eyes flickered as he stared at me as if trying to figure something out. Whatever he searched for, he didn't see. At least, not before we got interrupted. "Ah, there he is. I thought you wouldn't make it," the Vice-Chancellor, Mr. Toby Akindele, said, coming in from behind and offering him his hand for a shake. Aaron's attention shifted from me over to the middle-aged man, and a smile came onto his face. "Good morning, Mr. Akindele." They shook hands. "Good morning, Mr. Hart." Mr. Akindele turned his attention to me. "This is Aaron Hart," he told me. "Mr. Aaron Hart, this is Zera Adams." Aaron beat him to the introduction, and that made him raise a brow of interest. "You two know each other?" While I moved to say, "We met at the fundraiser." Aaron said, "We have a bit of history," at the same time. "Well, I didn't think this would go well, and so far it hasn't." "Okay, that's good then," Mr. Akindele said, brushing what Aaron had just said off lightly. It wasn't good, but it would be less complicated if he thought so. "He met with everyone after the fundraiser on Friday. You left earlier, so he didn't get to meet you finally. Mr. Hart would visit the university from time to time in the coming months, as you already know. We also expect every staff at the university to give their total corporation in achieving this year's goal," he explained. "Yes, sir, I will do my best too," I answered, and he smiled warmly at me. Mr. Toby took Aaron into his office to continue whatever discussions they had, and I hurried over to my first class. I taught the students and forged my way on with the lecture the best way I could. The last person I wanted to find at my door as I ended my first lecture was Daniel. I wished I had magical powers to make him go away, but alas, I didn't. I opened the door to my office, and I stepped in without uttering a word. I set my bag on the desk, and I heard the door close from behind, telling me he was also inside. My mind wandered to where I could start. I needed a cover-up story, one that he would believe without having a doubt. All those thoughts disappeared when I heard him ask, "Aaron Hart is Zion's father, isn't he?" His voice already sounded certain of the answer. I raised a brow as I spun around to meet him. "What makes you say that?" He walked past me and picked up the small framed picture on my desk and showed it to me. It was a picture of Zion and me, taken 3 months ago at the museum. He had the biggest smile visiting there for the first time, and I wanted to have the memory. When the photographer came over to us and asked if we wanted our pictures taken, I couldn't say no to him. Zion had a grin that brought his dimple out and made his hazel eyes flicker adorably. I had my arms wrapped around him while staring at him in the picture. My eyes dropped as the picture answered my question, and I knew lying and pretending would get me nowhere. He doesn't know, does he? I bite my lips and shook my head. He doesn't, I replied with a small voice. I didn't think we'd ever meet again, and I didn't want him back in my life. So I kept him out of Zion's. I'm a horrible person, but I was scared. Do you still love him? The word love echoed in my ears. I don't love him. I didn't even love him to begin with. What we had were fleeting emotions and infatuated reactions. It wasn't real, and I have told myself that every time I have thought back to those times. I never loved him, Daniel. We spent a weekend together, and that was it. He flashed me a smile. I think you have told yourself that for so long that you believe that's the truth. I don't know what happened between you two, but it shows in your voice that it was more than mere fleeting feelings. I don't need a shrink, I groaned. Fine, I might have given my heart to him, but I wasn't what he wanted. So I snapped out of the madness and decided to put myself first. So you no longer love him. I don't, and I'd appreciate you keep what you know about Zion to yourself. Can you do that for me at least until I'm ready to tell him? He nodded, adding, It's not my secret to spill. I smiled, feeling at ease, but knowing safety was now very far away. Besides, now I know why I'd never measure up. His words made me stare at him, confused. Why? Aaron Hart set the standards of men you should be with, and that's above where I can reach. I stepped toward him. Never sell yourself short. You're as good enough as Aaron Hart. The heart is the most important thing at the end of the day. His smile was small, and there was a happy flicker in his brown eyes. Thank you. He leaned in, closing the space between us and kissing my lips, taking me by surprise. I kissed back before I could stop myself. My arms wrapped around his neck, and I deepened the kiss and pulled him closer. I moaned when he wrapped his arms around my waist, moving it up to my back and squeezing the flesh there. He let go after a while and pulled away, placing his forehead against mine, while we both caught our breath. I am sorry if I took you by surprise. I just couldn't help it after you said those mice words. I licked over my bottom lips and smiled, still dragging deep breaths. Don't be sorry. I liked it, and I like you. I think you're a nice guy. I'm just not sure I can give you what you want. My life is at the point where nothing is certain, and I don't think it would be fair to add a relationship to the mix. So yes, I like you, but I don't know if that's enough. He grinned and stroked the side of my face, making me shiver at his touch. Only one way to find out. Again, he leaned in and took my lips between his for another round of heated kiss, and it made me smile. Maybe giving another try to love wouldn't be such a bad idea. There was silence in the next few weeks that followed. I had initially thought Aaron's presence at the fundraiser or the university would set my world upside down, but as it turned out, it didn't. I saw him a few times after that day, but only in professional settings, which came as a relief to me and everything around me. Still, I couldn't take chances. Dia made a schedule for picking Zion up from school, and in the last few weeks we have all stuck to it. From Monday through Fridays, each person was assigned to pick him up and take him to their place until evening, and I'd go over to pick him up and bring him home. The only days I had to pick him up were Fridays, because both Dia and her parents were busy on that day. Lionel got discharged from the rehabilitation hospital last week, and he was slowly getting back into the outside world. Although I could fit him into this schedule, I knew it was best to leave him out for now. With Aaron being out of the picture for the last few weeks, I could conclude that he would soon return to the United Kingdom where he belonged once the university collaboration completes, and that's in a few more weeks. Daniel and I have been moving on with our relationship, and at first I was skeptical and unsure about everything, but every day he makes it worth it. He always made me smile because of the little things he did, and he was happy only when I was happy. I also wanted him happy. Everything was falling into place, and I was grateful for it all. A slight knock came on my office door to disrupt my attention. My head lifted from the few projects I was currently assessing to see Daniel poking his head through with a smile on his face. "Hey," he called out. "Hey," I smiled, dropping the pen in my hand in the book and closing it. He stepped into the office. "You seem busy." His eyes scanned over the document on my desk before returning to mine. The perks of being a professor at Stanford University. I chuckled, and he smiled. He strode over to me and settled on the desk, trapping my legs between his. "I came in to see how you are doing, and from what I see, I'll say you're very well, beautifully well." I kept my eyes fixed on him. "Are you complimenting my work or me?" "Both." He leaned in and kissed my forehead, sending shivers down my spine. He moved his lips over my nose, pecking it, and then moving down to take my lips between his. I sighed into the kiss, knowing I needed this today. I needed him, and so I relaxed against him. I can't believe I denied myself this man for so long because I was afraid I would give too much and neglect Zion. We have been together this 3 weeks, and this has been my happiest, and I wanted it to last. Despite dating in the past few weeks and also going on a few dates, we have taken everything at a slow pace. He was being a nobleman, and I didn't want to rush into anything with him, including intimacy. Our pace was fine with me, and it gave me time to think about other things, including work, my son who would always come first, and my friends and loved ones. My phone went off on the desk. I reached into my bag and pulled out the phone, only to see Mrs. Edwin Loretta's ID on the screen. I sit up properly and cleared my throat before picking up the call and placing the phone to my ear. "Hello, Mrs. Loretta." I greeted with an unsure voice because Zion had been in her class for close to a year now, and she had never called me at this time, coupled with the fact that this wasn't even close to closing hours. It gave me room for concern. "Good day, Miss Adams. I am sorry to call and bother you, but we will need you to come to the school as soon as you can." "Is there something wrong?" I asked, already standing on my feet. "Zion was in a fight and badly hurt the boy he fought with," she said, and my heart sank in my chest. "He's in Mrs. Paula Williamson, the headmistress's office now, and they are waiting for you." "I will be there as soon as I can," I said and ended the call. I slipped the phone into my bag, which sat on the desk, and picked it up. That was when I noticed Daniel still in my office, and my sadness grew in multiple folds. I opened my mouth to speak, but he beat me to it. "If this is about Zion." He cupped my face and smiled. "You don't have to feel bad for leaving." He kissed my forehead tenderly before stepping back. "This is one reason I can't get enough of this man. His level of maturity and understanding was higher than most. I knew I had found myself a rare gem, and I wonder why it took so long." "Thank you." I drove over to the school as fast as I could, and it surprised me I didn't get pulled over by the cops for overspeeding all the way here. I guess the odds were in my favor. The one thing on my mind was Zion, my son, who had displayed violent traits, something he had never done since he was a child. I tried to think of any reason that would have led him to be so violent he'd take another kid to the school clinic. I didn't mean to cast blame, but all my mental fingers pointed at me. Perhaps I missed clues and hints on how to deal with him and this side of him. I missed the clues. I didn't raise him in a toxic environment, and I raised him to always be good, always be kind in his affairs with others. I taught him what right and wrong were, and ensured, to the best of my knowledge, that he followed the right path. Maybe he was responding to the change which had taken place in the last few weeks. Not only did I almost stop picking him up from school, but I also started dating Daniel. Maybe in my quest to find happiness in this new relationship, I had neglected my #1 priority and failed woefully. This was my fault, and I had to do better. I needed to speak to him and his class teacher, as well as the boy he had hurt. I feared how badly the boy's state was, and how this might scar him for life. His parents would be mad at Zion for harming their son that way. Any parent would be. I raced into the school and made my way into the nursery department and entered Mrs. Edwin's classroom. She saw me and her eyes showed concern, already seeing the stress and guilt on my face. I didn't hide how I felt about the whole situation. I couldn't. "Mrs. Adams, I am sorry we had to pull you out of work," she began saying, walking towards me. I shook my head. She didn't have to be sorry. It was my responsibility as a parent to be there for my son. She had already done her job as a teacher, and I appreciated it. It's fine. How's the other boy? Gabriel is fine. The nurses said he suffered a mild concussion, but he will be fine, she assured me. A concussion wasn't something I'd call mild no matter what, and I dreaded the answer to my next question. What happened? I'd never known Zion to be the violent type since he was a boy. So far, everything has come as a shock to me. Zion is a sweet boy, but even the sweetest can become vicious if pushed to it, she said. She then moved to narrate what had happened to me. During playtime, we assigned every child sets of toys to play with according to what they like. Gabriel took Zion's toys despite having his, and then when Zion got another, he came back to take it, and Zion would not give it to him. I came and told Gabriel to leave Zion alone, but when I turned to attend to the other kids, he had gone after Zion again and smacked him in the face twice. Zion pushed him off him to protect himself, and he tripped and hit his head on the wall. I should have stepped up in time, but I had my hands filled with Shamsi and Yolanda, who were learning how to share. Before I could intervene with the boys' conflict, the deed was done. She barely finished speaking when a man and woman in their late 30s stormed into the classroom looking angry and worried. "Where is our son?" The woman with the long, curly brunette demanded in a high-pitched voice, making the kids in the classroom turn to her. "Calm down, Mrs. Jones." Loretta stepped towards her. She cast a glare at Loretta, angry that she had interrupted her. "Calm down? My son is in a terrible state because some little demon shoved him violently," she spoke down on Loretta. My ears rang at her accusations and name-calling of my son in front of the class, where pupils who were friends with Zion sat, and I couldn't take it. I spoke up. "You need to calm down and not make conclusions when you don't know the entire story." She turned her attention to me, the belittling look she had on her face when she spoke to the class teacher lingering. "And who the hell are you?" "I am Zera Adams. I am Zion's mother, the student who had a fallout with your son." Her face reddened, and if looks could kill, I'd be dead. "So you're the mother of the little monster that attacked my son?" I dragged a deep breath. "My son is not a monster. He's a sweet boy, and perhaps if you had raised your son to be contented with what he had and not go after other people's stuff and turn violent when he doesn't get it, then maybe my son wouldn't have pushed him off." I was never one to condone violence for any reason, but judging from this woman's attitude, it was so hard to deal with all her craziness, especially when she was using all these horrible names on Zion. That, added to the story Loretta had told me, I cannot help but unleash on her. She gasped and surged towards me, but I didn't back away. I would not let Miss My Son is better than everyone else and deserves to be an asshole get her way with oppressing me. Loretta stepped in between us and held both arms out before the brawl could take place. "You two need to stop." She yelled, and the angry mother of Gabriel shoved Loretta's hands away and stepped back, crossing her arms over her chest. "Where is my son?" she demanded. "He's in the school clinic," Loretta answered, and without waiting to be shown direction, Mrs. Jones stormed out and her husband, who had been silent all the while, followed behind her. Loretta turned to me, her eyes flickering with empathy. "I'm sorry she said that about Zion. You're right, he is a sweet boy. I will show you to Mrs. Paula Wilson's office." She offered, but I shook my head, knowing something else was important. The angry parent who just left with her husband needed her help more. "No, I can find my way. Please see to Mr. and Mrs. Jones and make sure they don't miss their way to the clinic. I don't want them losing their temper on the poor nurse." Her smile came warm. "It's so considerate of you." She spoke to the assistant teacher before leaving the room, and I also departed for Mrs. Wilson's office. On getting there, I knocked on the door and received a beckon from the feminine voice on the inside to enter. I opened and stepped into the office, and I saw Zion seated on the chair facing Mrs. Wilson, who was writing something in the book, which was before her on the desk. He had his back turned to me, his head lowered, and his arms folded across his chest. Her head lifted as soon as she saw me. She seemed to know who I was. "Good day, Mrs. Wilson," I greeted, stepping into the office. Zion's head whipped around as soon as he heard my voice, and, Unlike the usual cheerful look he used to have on his face, he had a somewhat terrified one. I had raised him to know that I will not applaud him when he does what was wrong, and I could tell he knew I would not agree with what he did. I understand why he did what he did, but I would not make him feel it was acceptable to hurt anyone, no matter what. "Ms. Adams, it's so nice for you to join us. Please come seat." Paula smiled and beckoned to me. I walked to the chair next to the one Zion sat on and took a seat as well. "I know how difficult it must have been, having to leave your work and come over here." I offered her a small smile but shook my head. "I met with Mrs. Edwin and she told me everything. I just hope the other boy is safe." "He will be. I just got off the phone with the nurse and he's much better. Zion, however, has been quiet since he came into my office. This is my first time having him here, and I know he's just as confused as I am because he's not an aggressive or troublemaking boy." I expressed my surprise to Mrs. Wilson as well. Although she reasons with him, she speculated that his quiet spirit could be because of the recent changes in his environment. Then she asked if things had changed over, and I said yes. The change started a few weeks ago, and I thought he had adjusted to it very well. I was wrong. I apologized for the failure on my part, and I apologized to Zion and promised I would do better. I asked if I could take Zion home for the rest of the day, and the headmistress gave her consent. I got his bag and lunchbox from his classroom, and together we made our way out of the school. Good thing I had no homework to grade. I can dedicate my time to putting Zion through his homework. Then we would go over our moral code and do's and don'ts once again. These were essential. I had to make sure what happened today would never happen again. Then I get him ready for bed and take the opportunity to sleep early. All that plan flew out of my head when I approached the parking lot where my car was, and before it stood, Aaron Hart. He stood in a blue shirt and trousers with his back to the car and his arms crossed over his chest, and I knew he was waiting for me. This was the wrongest time to meet up and the worst place to meet because things would be beyond my control. My heart squeezed in my chest at the sight of him, and our eyes locked. He had the same formal and blank look he'd had on his face when we interacted with each other at the university a few days ago. After almost a minute of a locked gaze, his eyes wandered from mine, traveling down to Zion, whose small hand I held onto. I could see the flicker of emotions in Aaron's eyes at the sight of him. These emotions ranged from surprise to confusion to a bit of pain and then anger. His teeth clenched, and his breathing grew labored. I knew he knew at this moment Zion, my son, was his. It wasn't hard to guess. Zion was his father's son and had all his features, from his eyes to his smile and his face. My son barely looked like me, and I knew Aaron, realizing he was his, would come as easy as breathing. He looked back up at me for the second time, and he had a stormy look on his face, one that took my very being into a state of chaos. He wasn't happy. I didn't need the genius to tell me what that look meant. He knew the truth. He knew 5 years ago wasn't a fleeting moment like I had claimed to him many weeks ago. Something more than that happened, something I had kept away from him since then. The look on his face terrified me, and I swallowed shakily. In all the times I had known Aaron, I had never seen him as angry as he looked now, and my brain stayed frozen, not knowing what to do or which way to go. Although a raging storm went off on the inside, I did my best to hold on to his gaze with the last will left in me. My worst nightmare just turned real, and there was no escaping or taking me out of it. I didn't know how to respond, I didn't know how to act, and so I stood muted, like a dumb being. He furrowed his brows at me. "I think this meeting was long overdue, don't you think?" His voice stayed low, but it held so much anger and restraint in them as he spoke. I bit down on my lower lips and dragged in a deep breath. I couldn't afford to have him go off on me here and now. Not while Zion was here, and the look on his face showed he could not care less. He seemed pissed at me, and I understood why, but this wasn't Zion's fault, and there was no reason to drag him into the midst of the war about to unfold. He deserved none of that, and should stay out of it. I doubt it, though. The war about to unfold was about him, and it would affect him one way or another, and I won't be able to protect him. My mind told me, and I groaned inwardly. I had played out all the scenarios in my head. I could jump to the defense and ask him what he was looking for or what he thought by following me down here. I could even ask why he was stalking me, but the cards were no longer in my hand. They were in his, and he held the most important card, taking my son from me. "We can't do this here." These were the only words I could come up with. "Why?" he challenged, stepping up towards me, and I knew he was past the point of reasoning. No one would win if we decide to fight this fire with fire. One of us had to be calm and understanding, and since I didn't have the luxury of being dramatic, I chose to be the calm one. "Because he doesn't deserve to see that," I said, the he being Zion, our son. His hardened gaze softened for a moment before he spoke. "What he doesn't deserve is you." My heart broke into a million pieces at his accusation. A part of me agreed with him, and another part was just tired. "Your issues are with me, Aaron, so let's sort it out without involving him." He growled under his breath. "Then meet me at the Vanity Restaurant at 9 p.m. today," and gave no room for objection. I was supposed to take tonight and get a little rest. I didn't get that last night, but with the turn of today's events, it looked as if I wouldn't be getting the adequate amount of rest I need today either. The look on his face told me there was no room for debate. I bit my lips, knowing my back was against the wall, and I nodded. "I will be there," I said, and he stepped away from before me, walking away and not bothering to look back. I opened the car and strapped Zion into the seat before going around and entering. I drove off and wished I could drive off to a faraway place where I would never have to see or confront Aaron ever again. But alas, I didn't have that luxury. There was no place on earth I could run to that he wouldn't find me. I knew that. I wanted to turn back the hand of the clock. I wished I could do that. Then I'd go back to a few hours ago and change the course of my actions. I'd make sure I'd do everything to keep this truth from being known. And now I feared doing anything that would put me at risk of losing my son. I didn't know what waited ahead for me, but I knew it wasn't something good. I could feel it. My entire world was about to change, and there was nothing I could do about it. The more I thought about it, the more fear I have, and this fear wasn't going away soon. End of part 2. Part 3, 8:30 p.m. I stared at myself in the mirror, taking in my reflection and wondering if how I looked was okay enough for my meetup with Aaron Hart. I was in a black silk dress with a hollow chest that showed just about a hint of my cleavages. It has slim hands and left my shoulders bare. The outfits hugged every curve I had from up to down. It doubled in size after I had Zion, and though I thought it would leave in its time, it hadn't. I wasn't complaining. My dirty blonde hair I held up in a loose bun, letting a few curls fall onto my shoulders. I applied a little makeup and touched my lips with red lipstick and my lashes with black mascara. I needed to look my best, and though I felt as if this was too much, I reminded myself the man I was going to meet was Aaron Hart. He might have seemed like a normal man 5 years ago, but he was a businessman, a multi-millionaire, and I didn't want to appear wretched before him. Tonight, however, wasn't about me. It was about Zion, our son, and what the stakes were now that he was back in my life, into his life. A lot was going to change, and I wanted to know firsthand what those changes would be like. With the change in my schedule, I had to hire a nanny to watch over Zion while I was away. I already scheduled the meeting to not be over 2 hours at most, and I pray to God that Aaron would be considerate in using the time for the meeting. I was a mother to a 4-year-old son, after all. Daniel asked if we could make plans for the night, but I told him I couldn't. I wanted to tell him how the events of today had turned bad, but I wanted to have the full story before revealing it to him. I also hadn't told Dia yet for the same reason. I packed my car in the parking lot, which was easier said than done because of the many cars already parked outside. The Vanity Restaurant was one of the largest in the city, and it had great ratings from what I've heard, but this was my first time coming here. I didn't know it had this much pull on people, but the environment was as warm and welcoming as the critics said. Aaron chose here. He must have liked it too. I stepped inside and I glanced at the massive restaurant hall, which had much people seated around. My eyes trying to find Aaron from where I stood, but I didn't after a long while of a visual scan. A young male attendant approached me with a bright smile on his face, and my attention settled on him. Good evening and welcome to the Vanity Restaurant. Would you like a table, or have you already made an order for one? I'm here to meet someone, Mr. Aaron Hart, I answered, and he nodded, knowing who I spoke about, and beckoned that I followed him. I silently did, and he led me up the stairs to the executive floor, which had only but a few people present. It also appeared well organized and provided maximum privacy compared to the outer hall. I caught the sight of Aaron on the right side of the room, holding the menu in his hand and reading through it. His attention was keen as always, and his brows furrowed. He was now in a blue suit that would have complemented his eyes if it were daytime. His hair was in a neat ponytail, which brought out his broad, handsome face. It didn't feel right that I wasn't on the same page with him. I spoke up to the attendant. "I have seen him. I can make my way from here. Thank you." He smiled and nodded before taking his leave. I clutched hard on my purse and guided my legs towards him. I reached the table where he sat, and I drew myself into the other empty chair to take my seat. "You're late," he said with a displeased tone as my butt touched the seat, forcing me to glance at my wristwatch to see that indeed it was 5 minutes later than the time he gave. "I am here," I grumbled under my breath, but he heard because his head lifted from the menu he read, and his hard gaze rested on me. I felt chills at his haughty stare, and I adjusted in my seat as if I just had a bucket of ice water emptied on my head. This wasn't the side of Aaron I knew all those years. I knew the kind side, the gentle side, and so this side of him felt alien to me. Well, you kept the existence of his son away from him for 4 years. If you're honest with yourself, you would admit you don't deserve to see that side either. And I will keep paying for the choice I made for the rest of my life. What a horrible life. I realized my response wasn't the best either. He was right. I was late, and once again, I was in the wrong. "I'm sorry," I said, and I knew this won't be the last time I would use that line tonight. My apology was loud enough, but he behaved as if I said nothing. His gaze returned to the menu in his hand, and after a while of me sitting at the table awkwardly, I spoke. "I'm here, just like you requested." He placed the menu in his hand down on the table, and he folded his arms across his chest. "I want to know why," he said, his eyes leveling down on me. I knew what he wanted to know. He wanted to know why I cut him out of the first 5 years of his son's life. He wanted to know why I chose not to contact him after I found out I was pregnant with his baby. I opened my mouth to reply with all the words I had rehearsed on the way down here, but none of those reasons came out of my mouth. After a few seconds, my mouth snapped shut and my eyes dropped to the table. I fidgeted with my fingers, contemplating the words to say. I thought it was the best decision. There was no reason to involve you in my business. The last line must have triggered him because his eyes flickered. Except he isn't just your business. He's my son as much as he is yours, if not more. I stayed silent, despite every fiber of my bones wanting me to rebel and tell him his last line was a lie, but I bit down on my tongue. I didn't want to upset this man. He seemed ready to bite off my head if the chance presented itself tonight. You denied me 5 years of being a part of his life. Now tell me why I shouldn't take him away from you. There was no reason he shouldn't, but I could not imagine a world without my son. It would be a dark and miserable one, and I will not survive or want to live in it. It was a weekend together. I thought nothing would come of it, but it did. Understand there were a lot of things to consider. I barely knew you, and I had to make the decision all by myself. His teeth clenched at my words, and he shook his head. You could have told me when we met at the fundraiser. You could have come out with the truth. How did you want me to do that? Hello, Aaron. I saw you came in today, but we have a son, and he came out from the weekend we spent together over 4 years ago. Was that what you wanted me to say? I demanded. Yes, exactly like that. His response showed he saw nothing wrong with it. You had the last 3 weeks to come out with the truth, and you chose to keep it from me. There's no excuse. That is on you. I dragged a deep breath and rubbed my hand over my forehead. Then I'm sorry about everything. For not telling you about your son, and if there's a way to get on the same page about it, I want to hear it. He placed his hands down on the table, and my eyes caught the files sitting on the table before him beside the menu. My gaze immediately narrowed, wondering what it was. I want my son. I want to be a part of his life. I want him to get to know me, his father. I do not want to get the lawyers involved and take him away from you, and so I had this drafted." He pushed the file towards me and I picked it up and read through it. It was a very detailed consenting agreement in which I would sign my right over to him. He didn't want 50%, he wanted 80%. I scoffed after reading through the terms stated in the document. He was pushing all the limits and my back was already against the wall. This is ridiculous. I slammed the file on the table and shoved it away from me. I felt anger turn within my being and I couldn't control it. "How?" he asked, as if he wasn't there when this got drafted. "You literally just want to take him from me." I slammed, exhausted with trying to find reasons with him. It was obvious that would never work. He wanted to make me pay for my shortcoming, and he was doing that. These terms didn't appear one made by someone who was being considerate. It appeared one who was being an asshole. He raised a challenging brow at me. "Isn't that what you have done for 4 years?" "It's not," I insisted. "I didn't know if you would accept him as yours, or if you were just going to reject him. He had his life planned out. He seems to have found completeness with the woman he was searching for then, and a baby would have disrupted that." "You took that choice from me and it was never your place to do that," he snapped at me for the very first time. I pressed my lips together, "And now you're going to pay me back in kind." "That's not what this is," he argued. My eyes grew glassy, but I blinked them back. My heart was breaking and I couldn't fathom the very thought of losing my son to this man. "Then what is it? You're making demand for more times than I will have with my son. This is cruel. I do not deny you access to your son. He is still yours and you can still see him. Yes, but I'd have to get permission from you before doing everything. My son would no longer be mine but yours, because he is mine. I didn't want to accept this offer. It was too cruel." A painful tear slid down my face and it burnt my skin. I quickly reached for it and wiped it off. "You want to punish me. That's all you want to do. You want to take him from me, but you don't even know him or what he's like. And whose fault is that?" "He said what?" Dia exclaimed with a tone of disbelief. "He offered to take over 80%, Dia. That was his most generous offer to me for hiding his son from him for over 4 years. I answered, watching her pace around my room as if it was her world that had just caught fire. As soon as I left the restaurant, I called Dia because I felt trapped and couldn't go home. It was past 10 at the night, but she answered the call, and when I told her where I was, she came to get me. I couldn't even call and tell Daniel a thing because I didn't know where I'd begin. Daniel usually had his handful of troubles to deal with troubles, and I couldn't have it. I knew I'd have to soon, but for now, I needed Dia more. She brought me home and tried to console me while I sobbed my eyes out. She kept consoling me despite not knowing what had happened, and after I calmed down, she called Greg and told him she wouldn't come back home because she needed to be with me. Greg must have given in because she ended the call and didn't leave. She stayed with me, telling me it was going to be fine, and I remember that was the last thing I heard before falling asleep. I woke up with a still heavy heart, and I busted out crying when the memories of last night rushed back into my head, and I realized it wasn't a dream. That woke Dea up from the couch where she lay, and she raced over to me. She hugged me, and I clung to her with the last of my strength. When I calmed down, she pulled away and asked for an explanation. Then I told her Aaron had found out about Zion yesterday and already made plans to take him away from me. I explained the terms he had stated in the agreement that he wanted me to sign. "But this isn't fair. Zion has been your responsibility, and you've taken much care of him and loved him all these years. You have dedicated your time to him, and he's just going to sweep in and take him from you?" He told me his terms were a generous proposal compared to what he would demand at court, but I was so furious. I told him I was ready to see him in court, but I fear for the worse, Dia. What if we end up in court and he wins custody? I panicked, tears streaming down my face. The odds are already against me as it was. The odds were against me the moment I decided I was going to keep the baby and not inform him about it. Dia came and dropped to her knees before me. "Always expect the best outcome in all situations. I wish it was that easy. Aaron had the power, resources, and ability to get himself the best lawyers for the case, and they will win in the court of law without a sweat. I was doing well for myself in life, but it wasn't enough to go against Aaron Hart. I read up about the man, and his public image was impenetrable. He had the best of everything, and he had never lost ever since he emerged into the public eyes over a decade ago. Staying optimistic now, with all odds stacked against me, wasn't a luxury I could afford. Perhaps I should have accepted his deal and become less involved in Zion's life. It would be nearly impossible to cope with, but at least I will still get to be with my son once in a while. Greg knows a few good lawyers. He could get in contact with them and explain your situation to them. They will know the best way to go about fighting the legal custody, she said. I opened my mouth to speak, but snapped it shut when I heard a loud horn coming from outside the house. It was still in the early hours of the morning, so whoever was out there was crazy or wanted to wake everyone up. This neighborhood was a calm one, and so unnecessary noise wasn't something I heard often. The very moment my phone on the nightstand rang and I turned my gaze to it, the caller ID was unknown, and I ignored it. The call ended, and I turned to Dia, but my phone rang again, and this time I picked it up. "I'm at your door, Zera. Come and open it." Aaron's husky voice ordered over the phone, jumping over every formality that would have led to this point. My heart doubled in its beat, and my weary eyes moved to Dia, who seemed to know what was up. How was I going to face him? How was I going to deal with this? Many questions ran through my head, and I had no answer to them. I stayed silent, not saying anything. "I know you're there, and I know you're home. I'm not leaving here until I see and speak to my son." With that said, he ended the call. So he was the one honking the car and trying to wake the entire neighborhood up. I slid the phone down my face slowly, and my confused eyes stayed on Dia. "He's outside, and he wants to see Zion." I bit my lips to stop them from trembling. "You cannot meet him like this. You're all shaky and torn. Go to the bathroom and take a bath. Take as long as you like. If he is so ready to see his son, he'll have to wait." I nodded and got off my bed. "I'll pick your clothes out. The last thing we will give him is the satisfaction that he's got you beat," she spoke with much optimism. I tried a smile, which didn't work out. "Thank you." Almost an hour later, I stepped out of my bedroom with Dia behind me, and I made my way to the front door. I opened, and my eyes glanced around to see where he was, and when I didn't, I wondered whether he had gotten tired and given up the fight. But Aaron wasn't one to give up that easily. Not the Aaron I'd gotten to know these past few weeks. My eyes traveled down the street, and I saw a black Mercedes parked there, and as soon as I caught sight of it, the car turned on and it moved toward my front door. It packed, and out came the dashing Aaron in simple khaki trousers and a white polo. He had glasses over his face, and his hair was in the same bun it was when we met yesterday. He closed the car and locked it before approaching the front door, where I stood with Dia. With every step he took, my heartbeat increased. I was certain I could not face him. I was still a mess on the inside, and he looked prepared for chaos. "Zera, good morning." "It's hardly a good morning, since you ruined it as fast as it started." Dia didn't let me speak because she did, snarling at him. His attention moved past me and settled on Dia, who stood behind me. "You must be Dia, Zera's best friend." He spoke with a still calm and friendly tone, despite the venom Dia's voice had earlier. "I am, and I hope you know that means I don't like you." She bit out at him, not treading lightly with him. He smiled, and his deep dimple showed. And despite the tension, I felt myself melt on the inside. "I don't expect you to, but I hope that one day that would change. I hope you understand I am doing what every reasonable father would do if they were in my shoes. I want to be a part of my son's life, and that's all." There is a fine line between wanting to be a part of your son's life and wanting to cut him off from his mother, the woman who had taken sole responsibility in raising, caring, and providing for him against all odds in the last 4 years. That is cruel. Dia wouldn't even let me speak. Why would she? We had been friends for over a decade, and the state I was in last night was the worst state she had ever seen me in. I was a mess, and I was past the point of no return. No one had ever done that to me before. Aaron's new proposal equally affected Dia. She was Zion's godmother, and she had been involved in his life since the first day he came into this world. Aaron would cut her out of his life with the plans he had set out, and that was enough to make her mad. "I am sorry," he spoke, sounding more reasonable than he did last night at the restaurant or this morning on the phone. Perhaps Dia possessed the strength to make him yield, one I didn't have over him. I was denied the choice of being in my son's life for 5 years. I missed out on those essential years, and I will never get them back. What I offered her last night was me trying to be considerate despite everything. You do not even know your son, and you're already putting those he has known and grown to love so far away from him. I spoke up finally. My tone could not conceal the sadness and pain I felt any further, and his gaze drifted to me, and the emotions in his eyes were unreadable. "Zion," he calls, and his eyes travel past me. His eyes lowered, and they grew weak with mixed emotions. Mine followed, and they caught sight of my son in his blue pajamas. "Mommy? What's wrong?" He called out, his voice low and confused. My heart clenched, not liking that Zion had woken up and walked into this commotion. I raced over to him, for a moment forgetting about Aaron and wanting to protect my son from the unfortunate fate of him being taken from me by his father. "Mommy, why are you sad?" Zion asked, his eyes looking suspicious as he stared at my wounded face. I should have done a better job at concealing the emotions on my face, because now he had seen them and looked scared. I couldn't answer, so I pressed my lips together, and I took him into my arms, hugging him as if it was the last time I'll get to do this. "You." I heard the accusation in Zion's voice as the words came out. "I saw you yesterday at school." I turned around to face Aaron and held Zion in one hand so he can still see Aaron, whom he currently spoke. "What do you want with my mommy? What did you do to her?" "She's sad." Aaron opened his mouth to speak, but I beat him to it because I couldn't trust him to say anything good. Not at the point that we were. Zion," I started, bending and dropping him on his feet, but staying there so we had our gazes locked. "You know Mommy always loves you, don't you?" He smiled and nodded. "What a lovely son I have. Remember when I said you belong to Mommy and no one else?" He nodded again, and I pressed my lips together. This was getting harder than I expected. Looking him in the eye was the hardest part. "Well, Mommy didn't tell you the whole story. You see, for you to have a mommy, you need to have a daddy." If I was making a mockery of myself, neither Dia nor Aaron at the door said a thing about it as they remained silent and watched me. "He hasn't been around all these years, but you do have one, and he's here now." My eyes traveled back to Aaron, whose keen eyes stayed on his son, beholding, observing. It took a while for Zion to process everything I just told him, and I didn't rush him. My eyes stayed on him, reading the waves of emotions, from confusion to skepticism and unsureness, and after a minute of silence, his eyes narrowed on me. "He's my daddy?" he asked, as if that was the worst thing that had ever happened to him. Well, considering he's planning to take Zion away from me, he might just be the worst thing that happened to the both of us. "Yes, Zion, he's your daddy." I said the last 3 words almost as bitter as vinegar. Zion blinked a few times before turning around to face Aaron, who stood with his arms over his chest at the door. "I don't like him, Mommy," he blurted out before running upstairs, leaving the 3 adults in the room. I wanted to run after him, but Dia stopped me. "I'll go after him." She left the living room at the same minute, leaving us alone. I didn't want to be alone with Aaron, not after last night, not after he'd brought me to my knees and made me shed painful tears. I'd accept anything but being alone with him. I folded my arms across my chest and chewed on my bottom lips, a trait I always exhibited whenever I'm anxious, tensed, or worried, and right now, I was freaking out. If Aaron had left it to me, I would have introduced him to Zion as a friend and gradually worked the way up to him being his father. But things were not up to me anymore. I doubt he came here today, wanting to be introduced as anything but his father. "He's beautiful," Aaron spoke up from beside me where he stood, and I glanced at him, confused at first. "He's beautiful," he repeated, seeing my confusion. "Well, his father, despite being an asshole, is a beautiful man as well," I replied in my mind. "He is," I agreed, the tension I felt around me lessening. "He is sweet, smart, brave, and kind. He's also strong. I know he didn't take that from me because I'm not that strong. He let himself into the house and closed the door. Do not sell yourself short. You're one of the strongest people I know, and I know a lot of them, he said, and there was no form of mockery attached to his words. I flashed him a genuine smile. Thank you. He just paid me a compliment. This was the Aaron I knew 5 years ago, the one that made me smile throughout the weekend. And broke your heart before you left. Do not forget that part. Of course, I didn't tell him the entire story of everything that led me to cut him off completely after that weekend at last night's date. There was no need for him to know. He smiled as well, and his dimple appeared. You're welcome. He then stuffed his hands into the pocket of his khaki trousers, exhaling. So he doesn't like me. I pressed my lips together and flashed him an apologetic look. He doesn't, but for what it's worth, he doesn't like many people. Which is why your attempt to take him away from me would hurt Zion more than anything else. I completed the rest in my head. Does he like your boyfriend? He asked out of the blue, and for a moment I wondered who it was he spoke about, then it clicked. He's known Daniel for the last 2 years and still doesn't like him very much. I chuckled. A sad emotion flickered in his eyes, and I wondered why Zion's not liking Daniel made him sad. Then I realized it was probably because Daniel had gotten 2 years of getting to know Zion while he only found out yesterday. I am sorry, I said, hoping he believed me and know that I spoke the truth. He turned away from me. Zion needs me and he needs to be with me, and that's why you have to consent to my proposal. His voice switched from the calm and friendly tone it had a while ago into a rigid one, just when I thought we were finally getting on the same page. Zion doesn't need you. We have been fine on our own without you. He's been surrounded with love, affection, and attention, just like every kid deserves. He isn't like other kids, Zera. Do not talk to me about my son like you know him better than I do. I slammed, and here we go. Back to the fighting. You haven't even spent a day with him, and you think you have everything figured out. He's my blood. I don't need to spend a day with him to know what he's capable of, and believe me when I say he's not like other kids. Then what is he like? He's like me, and I'm not like other men, he answered, and that had to be the most absurd thing I have ever heard. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, right. Why did I think I could reach a sensible agreement with him? He did not differ from other men who were always trying to insert their dominance and take things by force from the weaker ones. I'm not giving you Zion without a fight, Aaron, I told him. You cannot fight me and win, he said with utmost certainty in his voice. For Zion I will die trying, I growled at him. Zera, Dia called from behind, and I spun around to see her holding on to Zion's hand while they both stared at us. She released his hand, and he walked over to me with slow steps. I stooped and stroked his hair down his face tenderly before standing up and stepping out of the way so he can meet his father. He took his step carefully, and I watched Aaron's agitated look as he waited for Zion to meet up with him. He stooped down when Zion reached him, and they came to almost the same height. You have the same eyes as me, Zion said, his tone coming off shy. Aaron laughed, and my stomach fluttered at how amazing it still sounded after many years. Yes, I do, and you have the same dimple I have, he pointed out. Zion bit his lips and nodded. Yes, I do. Then he asked, my favorite color is blue. What is yours? Also blue. I turned away from them to Dia, my heart aching in my chest and my eyes glassy. Aaron looked so good with Zion, and they clicked so well, as if they had met before. I knew he would be an exceptional father to him. Aaron already seemed to have everything figured out. If I didn't keep Zion away from his father all those years, my position in my son's life would not feel threatened now. As good as this looked, it scared me. I didn't want to lose Zion, and I didn't want to fight with Aaron. But he wasn't giving me much of a choice either. He wanted more than I could give, and that was unacceptable. She gave me an understanding look. I couldn't lose everything. I had lost enough. Your mind is somewhere else, Daniel said, and my senses returned from the thought in my head to the man sitting across the table, staring at me with the most fascinating look ever, despite the point he was making. I am sorry, I apologized, my eyes dropping a little. He smiled, and his hand came across the table and took mine for a quick squeeze. It's fine. A lot of things are changing in your life. It's okay to have a disoriented mind because of that. I would if I were in your shoes. Daniel was the sweetest and most understanding man I've ever met, and I wonder why it took me so long to give him a chance. Zion is with Aaron. I said, he took him this morning for swimming classes. They called a few hours before we left the house. Zion is having so much fun with Aaron. As he should, but you don't seem to be happy about that. I was happy, but I was scared. I feared the more time Aaron got with Zion, the more my son would get used to him and the options he provided. He had the luxury and lifestyle I couldn't provide, and that would take Zion's heart away from me. I'm scared. I've had him to myself for over 4 years, and now I have to share him. I don't want to share him. I whined like a spoilt brat, pouting sadly. I wouldn't even consider what Aaron wants as sharing. He wanted Zion all to himself, and I feared someday he would achieve his goal. Neither of us had spoken about his proposal after that night. It was the elephant in the room whenever we met in the last week, yet we acted like it didn't exist. Zion spends most nights with me and spends most of the days with Aaron, and so it has been in the last week. Though the silence existed, I didn't take it as a good sign. I moved to get my legal team ready and prepare for the worst. That's what I've done so far. I was ruining this perfect dinner with the worries of my son, and I didn't think that was fair to Daniel. It had been a hard day at work, and throughout the week, we barely had time out to ourselves, and so knowing Zion would be with Aaron today, I picked the day out. Here I was ruining the date I had longed for since the week began. I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm ruining this date. My voice dropped in its tempo. He shook his head and flashed me a small smile. You're not. You're with me now, and your problems are also my problems, and we will figure it all out together. How did I get so lucky with him? Let's eat, and once we are done, you can tell me about your journey so far in attaining a PhD degree in psychology. This made him laugh, but he nodded. Sure, we can do that. The date went well after I stopped worrying about Zion's well-being and concentrated on the man before me. Daniel had fascinating tales to tell that made the night worthwhile, and as he brought me home, I wanted him to spend the night. Zion wasn't home, and that meant he could spend the night without me feeling guilty for disrupting the peace or putting myself first. He walked me to the front door and tucked his hands into his pocket. I guess this is where I say good night? You don't have to. I pulled closer to him and kissed his lips. He drew a sharp breath and kissed back, wrapping his arms around my waist and pulling me closer to himself. I opened the door and pushed into the room, not breaking the kiss. I needed him and wanted us to cross this point in our relationship. It's been over a month, and I believe it was long overdue. Perhaps this would also help take my focus from Aaron back to him. In the last few days, I've had dreams, and they weren't the purest. He broke the kiss to stare me in the eyes. You sure about this? I nodded. Yes. I had waited for 5 years, and it was long overdue now. Come with me.